Welcome to Book Club Preview. Today we're looking at The Life of Pi, and we're going to read Part 1, Toronto and Pondicherry, Chapter 1, 2, and 3. And we're also going to look at the author's note, because I think there's some interesting pieces there. In the beginning, the author has a note saying, hey, look, I'm an artist. I wrote a book, it failed. I traveled around, and eventually I was in India, and I was having some breakfast, and a guy started talking to me, and then he asked me, hey, do you want to hear a story that will make you believe in God? And he's like, are you a Christian? Are you Muslim? Are you Hindu? Or are you trying to sell me some kind of religion? And the guy's like, no, this is a story that happened just a few years ago, right here in town. And then the author's like, well, okay, tell me this story. And so then the guy tells a story, which leads the author to find Mr. Patel, who tells his story, who ends up, then he's trying to share the story with us right now. And he said, wow, after listening to that story, it does make one believe in God. So that's kind of the start, right? Before we even get into the story. So it sounds like this story might be considered nonfiction, maybe biographical. It is generally considered fiction, or maybe you found it in the fiction section of your library. But this author's note makes us have to pause. Oh, is he just sharing someone's story, or is he making a story? We can decide that maybe at the end. Story starts off with the first person narrating it. And if you read the author's note, we can guess that this is Mr. Patel who's sharing the story. And he talks about he studied in England he had a double major. He studied religion and he studied zoology. And he really liked to study three-toed sloths, which he goes into a lot of detail about sloths and how much they sleep and how they might have some good senses, but they just don't care about anything. During his education, he did really well. He got really high scores. He got a lot of awards, and maybe he studied in Canada. Sorry, I could have been wrong there, because he almost got this Canadian award, but there was one student that was higher than him that got the award. And you can hear a little bit of bitterness in his voice as he's sharing this story. Then he talks about Richard Parker, who we don't know who this is yet, but he's like, I can't believe Richard Parker abandoned me so quickly. We then learn that he was in Mexico. He was really hurt and he was really sick. We don't know too much about what's happening, but the people in Mexico would come over and look at him and give him gifts and things, and he would laugh. He couldn't speak Spanish, they couldn't speak English, and slowly over time he started to heal. He said his legs looked like elephant legs because the water would just go straight down to them. His urine, his pee, was almost brown because he had so much toxin and so little water in his body that it just came out like, oh my goodness. And he just goes through all these different things. He was in rough shape. He has scars. We don't know what they're from, but he has scars on his shoulder and his back. But over time, he healed. We don't know much about that, but that's kind of something that happens. Then chapter 2, there's this really short description of someone's appearance. We don't know where this is coming from, what it's about. I guess that maybe this is, this is the author, okay? He's in India listening to this white-haired man. And the white-haired man says, this is what Mr. Patel looks like. And he gives a description, and then the author goes and finds him. I'm guessing that's what chapter 2 is, but we don't know. Chapter 3 comes back to the story, where we learn that the character, we don't know his name yet, but we can guess that it's Mr. Patel. He says, there was this guy, his name was Mamiji, or no, his name's not Mamiji, but I called him Mamiji, which is like wonderful uncle, great uncle, respectful uncle. Something like G is like respecting, and Mama is, I guess, uncle. So this Mamaji was a professional swimmer. He was one of the greatest swimmers in India, and he traveled around Europe, going into very famous swimming pools. But this guy tried to teach the narrator's parents swimming. They didn't like it. Tried to teach the narrator's older brother swimming. He didn't like it. But finally, the narrator loved swimming, and he taught him how to swim. So they would go swimming every day, or no, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they would be learning swimming and then practicing swimming, and they'd just go swimming. Mamaji would always talk about the pools that he'd visited, and he'd talk about these dirty Paris pools, these okay English pools, but then this one incredible pool, and I think it was in France, that was the best pool in the world. And he would talk about all of these pools and be telling these stories and describing them, making people laugh or making people sick. And people loved to listen to him, especially the narrator's father, who, as listening to these stories from Mamaji, decided to name his son, this is a French name, so maybe Poisson Molitor Patel. Patel, I'm guessing, is the family name. So Poisson Molitor Patel is, in Mamaji's opinion, the best pool in the world. If gods could come down, like Greek gods or goddesses, could come down from the sky, from Olympus, this is the pool they would want to swim in. And this pool sounded so beautiful that Mamaji would describe it with such passion that he would always, he'd just stop. He wouldn't be able to share the words of how much he loved it, and he'd just have to stop, and he'd be silent as he'd share the story. And so Mr. Patel, the narrator, says that his dad named him Poisson Molitor Patel after this swimming pool. That leaves us to some vocabulary. Indolence. Indolence is a word that we can use to describe sluggish, inactive, lazy. So if you think of a sloth, their indolence, their lack of activity. The next word is Magoo-like. There's a cartoon, very old cartoon, called Mr. Magoo. Okay, maybe that's not even the name of the cartoon, but that was the main character. And Mr. Magoo had these super thick glasses, right? They were really thick. And if you took them off, his eyes would get really tiny, and he couldn't see anything. And so he's describing, I think the sloths have like this Magoo-like stare when the glasses are off. You can Google a picture of Mr. Magoo, and you can kind of see what we're talking about. Repose is like relaxing, comfort. You can imagine like leaning back in your chair. This is a repose. Okay. Comfort, rest. Memento mori. This is an art style, I believe. You can Google this one too, and you can see many different pictures. But they're pictures with a skull in it. So it's a very distinct style to remind you of death. Incoherent. Incoherent means you can't understand, you can't hear, you can't sense. So again, we don't really know what's happening, but he goes to Mexico. He's almost dying because of some illness or sickness or hurt or something. And they turn the water on. All this fresh water comes out. And there's something about that. When he sees it, the amount, what does he call it? The waste of all this fresh water makes him dizzy. Mr. Patel! Mr. Patel! Incoherent. Okay, he can't hear or understand or anything. Last one I think is ludicrous, which is so strange, so ridiculous, you have to laugh. This is actually a rapper's name, very famous rapper, maybe like 5 years ago, named Ludacris. But that means so absurd, so strange, so unbelievable, you have to laugh. That leaves us with our discussion question. Do you think there is any story that could make you believe in God? Okay, the author talked about that in the author's note, that some guy in white hair just said, hey, do you want to hear a story that will make you believe in God? Sure, yeah, I'd love to hear that story. But do you think there's a story that could do that? And if you do, what is it? Of course, please make your own discussion question. That is all the time that we have for today. But thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Book Club Preview. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.